The subject matter of this presentation is in areas that I must admit that I've had some concern about my own ability to write and speak about these things. There's more doubt in me as I prepared to write about this and to speak about this than I really like to admit to. I have written books about banishing doubt, about having faith, about having confidence in yourself, and so on. And it seems to me that you get to a point in your life where all that you've done up until this point is sort of preliminary to something grander and something greater, and you're almost afraid of what that thing might be. And I don't think it matters what age you are. I think there comes a moment when you recognize in yourself that now I've got to take a leap. I've been safe. I've been in territory that I'm familiar with and that is easy for me. And now I want to take that leap of faith, but I don't know if I can do it. I always like the metaphor of standing on a cliff, and down below is an abyss, and this abyss is endless. And I think of our lives as like we're standing there and we know that this is all unknown territory. And it's like we jump, perhaps, but when we jump, there's like a rock that goes with us, and we hang on to this rock. And we're grabbing it and holding on to it, and we're falling, and we're being carried someplace that we're not quite sure where we're headed, which is sort of what our life is like. And we just hang on to this thing, this rock, whatever it might be, our reality, if you will, or our past, and we cling to it, and we cling to it, and we cling to it so strongly because we're afraid if we let go, who knows what could happen. And then there comes a moment or a time when you realize this thing isn't doing you any good. This thing that is your past, this thing that is all your teachings, this thing is that you're so familiar with that you don't want to let go of it, but you're not quite sure why you're hanging on to it. And then there comes a moment when you realize, hey, I can let go of this thing, and it doesn't really change anything. That's sort of the way I feel about entering into this whole territory of being able to manifest. And when I talk about manifesting, I'm really talking about the ability to take what it is that we think about, that's in the world of our thoughts, and to be able to have the power to bring that into the world of our daily experience called the physical world, whatever that might be. Now, when I started thinking about, after I had completed Real Magic and Your Sacred Self and all of the programs that are around those themes, a lot of people would write to me who had listened to these programs, who had read my books, and would say, what's the next step for you? You know, what can you do after this? I can't imagine that you could write anything any more than this, I've heard people tell me, or you could say any more. And always at the back of my mind was this idea that there is something missing in all of the literature that really doesn't deal efficiently and effectively with this ability to attract to us and to have show up for us in our lives what it is that we would like. Somehow we've come to believe that that's outside of our control, that whatever shows up, whatever happens to us, whatever the breaks are, whatever those things are all sort of in the realm of coincidences, and they happen if God wants them to happen for us, or if they're so predestined or ordained, and that we don't have that kind of power to be able to do that. That's reserved, if you will, and it's reserved for deities or people who have special dispensation from God, or holy people, or lucky people. But it doesn't really involve me. I grew up with that attitude, just like so many of the rest of us. But always at the back of my mind, I felt that there are some people who have the ability to get outside of that mentality And there are some people that just attract things to themselves, and they seem to show up, and we just call them lucky. But they're not. There's certain qualities, there's certain behaviors, there's certain attitudes that people have that we've never really made a science out of, okay? We've never really studied in depth. And I thought to myself, I'm going to talk about manifesting. Many of you listening, many of you here today with me, know that my work has really shifted. It's shifted from teaching people how to manage their emotions and teaching people how to avoid being victims in their lives and to have psychological strength and how to raise children like this and all of these things that I've... And then there's been a shift, and in the last 10 or 15 years, the shift moved away from matters physical and into matters metaphysical, beyond the physical. And then my work took on like this real sort of spiritual tone. And God became a very important part of my life and my work when this wasn't so in my earlier work. In fact, if you look through books that I wrote 20, 25 years ago, you won't even see references to the word spiritual or to the word God. And if you look at more recent things, and people ask me about that, you know, and I say, you know, it's just as intriguing to me as it is to you. I don't know why either. But my writing seems to, and my programs, my work seems to reflect a consciousness that I am going through, and it seems to reflect what the rest of the world is going through as well. That there is a shift, and I seem to be one of the spokespeople for that shift. When I started into this area and writing in this area, I immersed myself in spiritual literature. I read the Bhagavad Gita, the book that Gandhi based his life upon. It translates to the Song of the Lord. It's a book that you can read in one afternoon, 18 short chapters. But you can study it for a lifetime. You can read one little short paragraph from it each day and just try to practice it and see what it means. And I studied that almost every day, and even working guides to the Gita. And I immersed myself in A Course in Miracles, which is a whole collection of writings that a lot of people aren't sure about what the origins are, and there's discussions about who did it, and is it really the work of Jesus Christ, and is it channeled work, and so on. But whatever it is, and whatever its origins, what I know is if the world were living by the principles that are in there, we could really solve virtually all of the problems that we face as a people. And it's really a whole text on how to create miracles and how to live at a loving, higher place in our lives. And I also immersed myself in Madame Blavatsky's work. And she wrote a book back in the 19th century called The Secret Doctrine. And in The Secret Doctrine, she made some predictions. And Madame Blavatsky was one of the people, she was the founder of the Theosophist movement and was very, very influential. Had met Gandhi herself when he was a very young man, influenced people like William Butler Yeats and Jack London and many of the novelists and so on. A woman from Russia who traveled all over the world and lived in India for a long time. And she wrote this fabulous collection of metaphysical works about what is possible for humanity. And one of the things that she predicted is that in the last quarter of the millennium, the last 25 years of the millennium, and into the year 2011, there would be ushered in an enormous spiritual revolution. And this revolution would transcend anything we had ever known before about revolutions, like the agricultural revolution and the industrial revolution, when the whole shift took place away from agriculture and towards industry, and then the technological and even the information revolution that we've seen in the last few years. And she said when the spiritual revolution is ushered in, it will transcend all of the previous revolutions. And it will begin in the last 25 years of the millennium, which was the year I wrote Your Erroneous Zones. And she also said that the people who will be the leaders of this revolution will not be the people in power. And if you look at the changes that have taken place on the planet in the last 20 years or so, since the beginning of the last 25 years of the millennium, those changes are really astronomical. I mean, we've almost become blasé about them. But I mean, the fall of Berlin Wall and the dismantling of apartheid and the dismantling of communism and the dictatorships that have been overthrown, and even the fact that you can't smoke on airplanes anymore. I mean, these are monumental changes and shifts that have taken place. And really the result of not so much people in power saying, let's not do this anymore, this isn't a nice way to treat people, but because of what Victor Hugo said in Les Miserables, there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And when Madame Blavatsky talked about who the leaders of the spiritual revolution would be, she said that these leaders will be ordinary people, regular, everyday folks, school teachers, musicians, artists, cab drivers, regular folks. And these people will speak out with a voice, and this voice will be heard, and then the bureaucracies will fall in line and begin to reflect what it is that this consciousness is instituting in our people. And if you look at the people who have been instrumental in changing consciousness in the last 25 years, you look at the people whose programs you listen to through Nightingale Congress and ask what are their backgrounds. You find out that they're salesmen. Marianne Williamson was a singer, a nightclub singer. Louise Hay was a dancer. Dennis Waitley was a salesman. Zig Ziglar was a preacher. People who just did everyday, regular things. I was a school teacher. And somehow there's a power, there's a pressure, there's something that has come and put us in a position of just talking about this kind of shift, this kind of consciousness. And what has happened for me, the little school teacher, is that when I finally immersed myself in the most spiritual text that I have really studied was the New Testament. I listened to the New Testament when I was a little boy. And I lived in a series of foster homes when I was a child. And so they would, wherever I would go, they would just sort of put me in whatever church group that particular home practiced. So I'd be a Baptist one year, and the next year I'd be a Methodist, the next year I'd be a Catholic, and I'd be a Jew the next year, whatever. And, you think that this is some terrible thing, that you're not going to get any roots. But really what it did for me was it exposed me to all kinds of different ways and different approaches to these truths. And then I sort of let that go, because there was an element of imposing it and fear that I found myself being exposed to. To fear God was what you were supposed to do, sort of. And so I let that go in my life for a long period of time. And then before I began to write about these books that sort of moved me away from psychological matters into spiritual matters, I really immersed myself in the New Testament. I read it from beginning to end, particularly the parts in red. Remember the parts in red? That, this is what other people were saying about what Jesus Christ was saying, and then this is what Jesus was saying, and it's like, this is in red, so, you remember that. And you'll hear me talking about this in this program a great deal, a lot of the things in red. Not because I am trying to proselytize for any particular religious point of view, or I'm trying to recruit anybody, or, I don't see myself in that role at all. It's not the purpose of what I'm talking about. But more to give us an understanding of what divine spiritual messages can mean for us in our life, and how some of this has been misinterpreted as we have moved towards becoming more spiritual people. And so you'll hear me referring to this quite a bit. And then one of the things that I read was this idea that Jesus Christ said to the masses, that something to the effect that even the least among you can do all that I have done, and even greater things. That you have this power within you. And reading that and interpreting that literally means being able to produce miracles, doesn't it? And being able to make things happen that we really sort of think are reserved for other people. And so what has happened with most of us is that we have come to believe that there are spiritual beings that we have sort of deified, and then there's us, and that we are separate from that. And in our separation, we have sort of given the power of being able to do these divine kinds of things, like manifest. The gift of fish and loaves is the gift of being able to feed the hungry from one's consciousness. The thought is enough to bring food into a place where there is a need for, where there is starvation, where there is hunger. And you think about, well, how can do I have the power within me? Is this what I'm being told? That I have the power within me to think food and then just wave a magic wand and there is food? Do I have that power? Well, according to, if you read that literature thoroughly and interpret it literally, yes, you do. But most of us find it very difficult to even begin to accept this idea that I can have a thought about something, and with that thought, I can then shift it to having it materialize or manifest or show up in the physical world. But I'd like to suggest to you that that's the only way anything gets into the physical world. That manifesting is really nothing more than everything showing up in the physical world is the result of a divine idea. Everything, including you, and everything that you have, and everything that you see, and everything that you observe, and everything that you notice. And that somehow we are being encouraged to disregard our old belief systems, that that is something that is reserved for others other than myself.